Hello, book people. PT Hilton here with week 3 of the Dream Read Along. This week we're going to be looking at the collection Dream Country. This collection is a little different, for one thing, because it's much shorter. It's only 4 issues. And for another thing, because it is 4 kind of short standalone stories. Some of them do have greater replications throughout the rest of the story. Some of them do not. But we're going to talk about those. Because this is short, I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about a little bit more about how Sandman was originally collected, and then use that as a way to get into the stories. So back when this was first coming out in the, I think the very late 80s, that was when the first one came out, maybe 89-ish. Collecting comic books together in trade paperbacks was not a really common occurrence. It happened, but was not too common. So when Sandman started getting some critical acclaim, there was a big write-up in Rolling Stone, I think might have been the first one, or one of the first big ones at least. DC decided to collect it, but instead of collecting the first one, Preludes and Nocturnes, they collected the second storyline, The Doll's House, and that was the first collection that was put out. That seems kind of weird, but you remember that it wasn't a common thing for comics to be collected and like put out in non-comic book related stores back then. So they put that out, and Neil Gaiman wrote a little like text piece at the beginning, kind of explaining what had happened in the story so far, and that sold very well. So then they put together the first 8 issues, and that's part of the reason that's called Preludes and Nocturnes, because it's the prelude to the first book that was actually released, The Doll's House. Weird, I know, but then this collection of 4 short stories came along, and it was partly because Neil Gaiman said when he was writing the longer arcs, he would get these different ideas of for these different stories, but also it was really when Sandman was really starting to get a lot of critical acclaim and was really picking up steam, and they wanted an easy place for new readers to hop on, so that was part of the impetus for these 4 short stories put together. A related note, this was in a lot of ways when the term graphic novels started being used to refer to collected editions that had previously been single issues. So the term graphic novels was already out there, had been used for a while, but in its truest sense, graphic novel means a collection that was put out as one story, one volume. So if you think of like The Sculptor by Scott McCloud, that is a true graphic novel. Part of the reason they started using these terms was to distance themselves from comic books. People thought of comic books as a certain thing, and when they put out Sandman, they're like, oh, we gotta, when bookstores started carrying it and things like that, they started using this term graphic novels, even though technically it's not a graphic novel because it was published as individual issues originally. Neil Gaiman even tells a story about one time he was at a party in London, and he was talking to a London book editor, and the editor asked him, what do you do? And he said, oh, I write comic books. And the guy was like, oh, okay, whatever. Was clearly unimpressed. And he's like, well, what do you write? And he was like, well, I read this comic book called Sandman. And the guy's eyes got big. He's like, oh, you shouldn't say you're a comic book writer. You should say you're a graphic novelist. So the term graphic novel sometimes has been used to distance certain comics, to make them sound like a little more important than other comics, which is why for a long time I really didn't like the term graphic novels at all. But I think it's so widely used now to refer to any collected edition, even if it wasn't originally issued as one volume and was originally issues, that I think that battle's over and I need to get over it. But anyway, that's a strange aside. Let's talk about the 4 stories within here. Of the 4 stories in Dream Country, I think 2 of them work really well. One of them works pretty well, and one of them doesn't work very well at all for me. The first one, Calliope, is the one that works pretty well, and I actually think as a kind of a standalone like horror story, it works great. It's a great little horror story. I love how the first line is, I have no idea, and the last line echoes that, I have no ideas. The story, of course, is the story of a writer who comes into possession of this Greek muse, Calliope, and uses her to recatapult his career or whatever. He's had one successful novel, but he can't get started on the second one, and the muse helps him get going. Some important things here, though, are that we learn a super important piece of information. Aside from the coolness of the story itself, we do learn one super important thing, which is Calliope is Morpheus's former lover, who actually had his child. That's something very important that we're learning for the first time here. So for me, as a standalone story, that works great, and there's that piece of information. So pretty cool story. The second one, The Dream of a Thousand Cats, is one of my favorites, even though it basically has no repercussions in the rest of the Sandman story, the rest of the series. I love it as a standalone story. It's such a cool idea. We've already talked about the idea in The Doll's House that humans can kind of they kind of shape the way the endless are. The endless are kind of almost the servants of humanity and living beings and our ideas. They're like the manifestation of certain aspects of us almost, right? But in this we get the idea that humanity's ideas can actually shape reality. I think that's pretty cool. The third story is A Midsummer Night's Dream, and this one is often referred to as one of the best issues of the Sandman. It's we saw where Morpheus was meeting with the guy every 100 years. We saw him kind of strike up a deal with Will Shakespeare, but we didn't know what the deal was. In this one, we learn he's agreed to write 2 plays for Morpheus throughout his career, and this is the first one. And something about this issue just really brings together everything that's great about Sandman: the mythology, the beautiful power of ideas and story, but then also the sadness, the whole thing where Shakespeare's so cut off from his son. It really brings it all together. The neat ideas, the Robin Goodfellow kind of escaping at the end, so many great things, and that great line from Robin Goodfellow about this is true, it never happened, but it's true. That's such a great commentary on stories. Interestingly enough, the story Calliope was actually supposed to be about Robin Goodfellow, according to Neil Gaiman, where it was going to be that he was running he was going to be kind of in possession of the muse, and he would like rent her out to different people basically. But that story got, of course, rewritten. So we were eventually going to find out that that's what an old Robin Goodfellow in present day would be like. He'd be renting out this muse. But that story was not told, and it was changed to Calliope. Finally, the last issue in this is one of the rare misses in the Sandman world for me. It's the story of a kind of obscure comic book sidekick named Element Girl, who I believe was the sidekick of Metamorpho, who's basically the same powers of her, except he's a dude. And it's, I don't know, something about it. I think it's just kind of sad in the whole idea that she's just this broken down person. She has all these amazing superpowers, but she's just super depressed and doesn't want to live life anymore. Something of it is that's just kind of a bummer for me. So it's not my favorite issue at all. But I'm curious to see if any of you really connected with that issue, maybe more than I did. So there you go. That is Dream Country. We're going to be back next time for a look at Season of Mists, getting into another longer storyline. By the way, these short story collections, as much as I said this one was kind of 2 big hits, 1 sort of hit, and 1 miss for me, these short story collections are some of my favorite stuff in Sandman. We've got a couple more to come. We've got Fables and Reflections and World's End, and then I think those are the only other 2. Am I missing one? I'm not sure. But both of those I think are even stronger than this one. So looking forward to those. Let me know what you thought. I'd love to hear your comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye.